The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
Co-founder Galileo Capital, Warren Ingram, regular contributor to The Money Show, personal financial advisor, chartered financial planner, and many other accolades to boot. He wants to talk about building generational wealth. Before we get to generational wealth, I need to know what you're smoking here, Warren, because generational wealth implies that there's enough left over at the end of your life to give the next generation a leg up. And I don't know if there's too much intergenerational wealth being created. Never mind, well, not enough for one lifetime, never mind kickstarting the next one. How realistic is this?
There are quite a few families, in South Africa that are in this position, and I'm not talking about the ones that we see in the headlines of the media all the time. I'm talking about families that get near the end of the founders' lives, let's say mom and dad. And they know they've got enough money to live on, and certainly have some money to give to the next generation, and I think it's I think it's easy to kind of get not distracted, I think, but despondent that no wealth is being created. But let me tell you, I think there must be quite a few businesses generating that kind of money right now, especially in the world of solar right now, as an example, and many other businesses. I think it's one of those things. We tend to focus on the bad times and the like, Bruce, but there are families out there, and building businesses, either things that they've started or working for other people that are doing this consistently, day after day, year after year. And I'm not talking about the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Ruperts and the Motsepis. I'm talking about kind of pretty ordinary South African doing this very consistently, day after day and year after year and decade after decade.
Okay, well, tell me how to do it then, because I think it's kind of important. Is the prerequisite that you need a big idea, you need to start an empire, grow an empire, capitalize on the growth of that empire, or can we build, realistically speaking, intergenerational wealth by letting other people do the work and us just investing in it?
I think that's exactly right. So I'm not, the big names that we've all seen that have the fabulous private jets and fund their ventures into space and the like. Those are really bright, really hardworking, and supremely lucky people. And we can't underestimate the role of all three factors in them generating that wealth. I'm not talking about luck. I think, when you focus on luck as an investment strategy, you're bound to be disappointed more often than not. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about, let's just say someone who, starts out, just working, just getting a job, starts saving, and it's possible for them to do. It could be someone that starts a small business. It's not really the success of the business venture that they've got or the career they've got. It's the habits that they develop for themselves, and then how they impart those habits on their children. And maybe step 1 and 2 are worth kind of talking about together. So the one is you have to start saving and then investing as early and as fast as possible. And I know that sounds obvious, but it takes a heck of a long time for most people to kind of build that first million. And so, to build that first million, for most of South Africa's population, if you retire with $1 million, unfortunately, you're not in the intergenerational wealth. But it is possible for people to build up that money and then to take 1 to 2. And I think, when you start getting into that space of investment assets where you're taking 1 million and making it 2, then you're getting into the point of building some kind of wealth that maybe becomes intergenerational. And there's this age-old rule that I don't think we've spoken about, but I'm sure lots of people do, called the rule of 72. And the premise of the rule of 72 is you say, how fast do I expect my investments to grow? And I'm using 10%, and I'll explain why now. But I think 10% is a good projection. And then you say, well, take 72 and you divide it by the growth rate of your investment. So if we're saying 72 divided by 10, fortunately, even I can do that math. So that's 7.2.
Right.
So the reason we look at that is it's telling us that it will take 7.2 years for your money to double if you expect it to grow at 10% a year.
Okay.
And clearly, if you want to get some money to start growing and start doubling, you need to get that started as fast as possible. Why we talk about 10% is if you look at the average growth rate of kind of a typical balanced portfolio, a balanced unit trust, or most kind of exchange traded funds that track shares, or most general equity funds, a growth rate of about 10% a year over a decade or two is a very fair, very realistic assumption, despite all the negativity and all the stuff that's happened.
The money.
Sorry, we had a little bit of an interjection there, Warren. But yes, absolutely. That notion that it can happen, and that's all well and good. But when we need to understand what the framework is of intergenerational wealth. My idea of intergenerational wealth is what the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts pass on to each other. You're suggesting that we can create enough money, or we can certainly save enough money in our lifetimes to look after ourselves during our lifetimes, hopefully give the next generation a bit of a leg up during our lifetimes. But on the day that we depart this mortal coil, there is something left in the kitty to help them on their way so they get a bit more of a head start than perhaps we did.
Exactly right. And then you start to build a legacy, a family legacy, because you're giving the next generation a head start that perhaps you didn't have. And I think you're giving them two head starts there, Bruce. It's not just one. So it's not just, some capital that they can use to, for example, to, put down a massive deposit on a house or potentially buy a house. You're also giving them a legacy of specific behaviors that you've developed and habits that you've developed and conversations that you've had with your children that give them a head start financially, both from a numbers point of view, but also a financial literacy and financial habits point of view. And I think that's maybe the part that's kind of a softer skill that we just don't talk about enough when it comes to money. So I think, definitely the one part is save early. Second part is keep saving every single month, every single year, accelerate the saving, because that's how you make the rule of 72, work in your favor. You start to say, well, if you save every month as well, then suddenly it doesn't take you 7 years to kind of, double your money. It takes you 3 or 4 years to double your money. And then, making 1 into 2 into 4 is a 8 or 9 year exercise. It's not 18-year exercise.
And the best example of this is our discussions with Julia. And we've been doing the Julia discussion annually for most of the last decade, at least. And Julia starts out with your advice, of course, taking a lump sum of 70,000 Rand, and this is going to be fuzzy memory stuff, but 70,000 Rand, putting it into investments and trickling it into investments just before the global financial crisis. She then takes a third of everything she earns, and at that stage it's 300,000 Rand a year, so she's investing 100,000 Rand a year regularly into the stock market, and as her income grows, she invests a third of that income. She is human. If you cut her, she bleeds, apparently. And during tough times, she panics a little bit, but she comes back to investing. And over time, you see this astonishing accumulation of wealth up until a point where about 5 years ago, she stops adding to South African investments because she has kids and buys a house and gets the Volvo and opens her own business and starts doing more offshore investing. But that South African sort of cash pile is growing at an astonishing rate every year, with her doing nothing. And the money makes money. And it is the most beautiful thing to watch.
And I think, we had lots of feedback from listeners over the years about Julia. Especially in the beginning, people thought we'd kind of manufactured her, and got an actor in or something to talk about, to pretend to be somebody. And over
she's
time,
a very good actor. If she is an actor, she's very good at it. She's real. She is real.
But one thing that she wouldn't mind us saying is she's by no means some sort of entrepreneurial superstar where she built something that was life changing. She worked in businesses, and she built a career in working for other for other people, and was incredibly diligent about the way she saved, and that was the superpower, was staying disciplined and saving. And when she got increases, saved faster and saved more, while going on holiday, while having children, all of those things, So she lived in some respects. I'm saying it as if she's not dead. She's not. But she lives a fairly normal life in many respects. But she's extraordinary in the way she starts saving and then keeps saving so consistently without excuses and without that sort of negativity. And then you and I watch the results, which are, as you say, astonishing, but actually not different. She didn't, become a superstar investor where she was doing things totally different to everybody else. She was buying index investments and stuff that's available to all of us, even if we only have $50.
Dare I say she was doing really boring things, but really boring things deliver superlative outcomes. And no fancy stuff, no hocus pocus, no share trading accounts where she was trading in and out of positions 3 times a day, waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning to see what was happening on Asian markets, and then last thing before bed at 11 o'clock at night, seeing what happened in the US and panicking each and every single day about minutiae of market movements. Just letting the market do the work. The market doing the work, making the commitment. And it is somebody one day, and maybe she'll do it herself, but just to tell the Julia story as an individual story. And many people have criticized over the years that, but she earned so much. Well, yes, because she was very good at what she did. We're talking about the possibility here. And most people say, well, you can't build wealth from a job. And I think Julia is the exception that says, hold on a second, you're talking nonsense. It is about sometimes some sacrifice and not living and not buying stupid cars and stupid houses and living and silly outfits and all of that sort of stuff, but being sensible about balancing a life between enjoyment and commitment to long-term savings.
And I think being very clear and very deliberate in the way that you spend, and not just doing things out of habit. So for example, she absolutely loves travel, and so that was, in her life, the thing that she would spend much more money relative to the rest of how she spent. So for her, car was just a means of transport, and it needed to be safe and secure. Beyond that, she was happy to drive a very low cost, very cheap car for a very long period of time, until the kids came along, and then she bought a fractionally more expensive.
No, but you're missing a crucial step here, Warren, because my memory is not fantastic, but on this fact, it is absolutely clear. And it also comes down to the choice of life partner that you introduce into your life, or you're allowed to be introduced into your life. They've got to be somebody who's fairly like-minded in the way in which they value money, the values they hold around money, their sense of expectation when it comes to money. And she chooses a life partner who comes along, and when she says, I need to get a new car, you take the old one, which by then I'm assuming is a fairly dated version of an Opel Corsa Light, and the man of sufficient masculinity to fold himself double into that little car and to drive it until the wheels fall off is quite remarkable. That is also a critical lesson in terms of ego, pride, and not allowing that nonsense to get in the way of a strategy.
Absolutely. I had and I'm saying the words carefully here, but I had the real pleasure of speaking to one of our fans of our show and today, and he is very proud of the fact that he drives a 17-year-old car and then alternates that with his son's 11-year-old car, and he has in any respect triple generation wealth, and he's deeply proud of the fact that he'll drive in a car that a lot of people with much less money and incredible amounts of debt would be embarrassed to drive, and his only criteria is the car needs to be safe, and there's much more that he can do with his money, both for himself, his family, and for the charities that he funds, and those are ingrained principles that he's got, that he's passing on to his children. And I think maybe that's the key in this, is building intergenerational wealth is not just a money thing. It's also giving your children a financial education. It's imparting the habits that you've built up over time, and not just hiding money conversations from your children. It's about explaining to them how you do things, what's your approach, and maybe what is ours, the family, what are the ways we think about money, and what do we think about conspicuous consumption, and what do we think about, living to kind of other people's idea of what life should be, and is it important that other people think we're rich, or is it important that we become custodians of money, and we use it wisely and we respect it, and do we allocate some money to help others, and then are we thinking about ourselves as protectors for future generations? Because those are fabulous habits to impart on children, and to do it from a very young age, and to have lots of serious conversations with children on an ongoing, continuous basis, I think is absolutely key in building intergenerational wealth. And something, when you talk to parents about this, that they kind of shy away from this a lot of the time, to say, no, I could never tell my kids, they'll never work, or that they'll never, kind of have ambition. And I think that's a cop out. That just means the job's not done. You've got to be teaching your children all the time and talking to them all the time, and don't rely on schools to do this, and don't rely on kind of a 30-second conversation, or kind of a game, gamifying money. This is something you've got to impart, like you impart healthy habits and all the other things. This is one you've got to give to your children. Don't just focus on the money side, it's the education side as well.
And tragically, most families, I suspect, as lifespans increase thanks to better medical care, and we take better care of ourselves, hopefully, during our lifetimes than perhaps previous generations did. We're better nourished. We have far more advantages. As life expectancies extend and we are able to live longer lives, there's the likelihood of being able to leave something behind diminishes, simply because in the last couple of years of life, medical expenses can go awry and all sorts of things. I mean, there's lots of stuff that can happen. But if you have imparted valuable life lessons on your children in terms of money, respecting money, where it comes from, and what it can do without you interfering in it, you will be leaving them better off than most kids, frankly, in the world.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit, because I feel if we're going to be living healthier lives for longer, then that means we actually have the ability to earn more money for longer periods of time. And
fair enough.
And
fair enough.
And so the opportunity to create triple generation wealth in your first generation as a very ordinary career person. I think the opportunities are there. And we just look at how much wealth was created by Warren Buffett, in his 50s and 60s, or Yanni Mouton, in his 50s and 60s. I think, just kind of planning for the average, or planning for a degrading life, I think is a real mistake now. We could be really healthy, and maybe 60 is the new 40, and so on and so on. All those cliches are real.
I stand chastised and corrected. I've got an email. It says, "Good day, Warren. I'm a retired individual. Congratulations. I have some money, about 250,000 rand, that I would like to give my two sons. I think it would benefit them to get the money now rather than wait for my death one day. I want to assist them to pay off some debt and invest the rest. What would this be the right thing to do? What is the best way to pass the money over to them?"
I couldn't agree more. I think it's a fantastic idea, and certainly if your two sons are proving to be reasonably responsible with money, and that they are going to use it to settle debt, and it's debt that was incurred, in a good way. In other words, maybe it's home loans, and they just need a leg up in difficult times. Then I think it's a fantastic idea. And just to remember that SARS allows us to donate up to 100,000 rand per year to anybody you want, including our adult offspring. So if you're married, certainly you and your wife could each donate 100,000 rand to your sons this year, and then the balance, the 25,000 rand each in the next tax year. So that would be my suggestion. Is the simplest, cleanest way to do it. Just keep records of everything and be sure to tell SARS what you've done, but you're certainly entitled to do it, and doing it early in their lives while they're accumulating capital and living with very natural debt that most people would have if it's, a reasonable house, and helping them to pay it down, I think is an incredible gift. And I don't think enough parents think about this. They kind of leave it, to the will, and then, their 60-year-old children get some money when the 80-year-old, 85-year-old parents die. And I think, that's also not bad, but I think most kids, adult kids at 35 or 45 would derive much more benefit from kind of early gifts of money than later. And certainly, tax-wise, donating to your children every year, if you could, would be a very efficient way of reducing your estate, and helping out your children at the same time.
Does it have to be a physical transfer of cash? Can it be a book entry?
I suppose you could do a loan. It's actually, again, fabulous question, but I'm not.
I will.
I'm
okay,
not sure
I'm going to leave it with you, Warren, because I'm just looked up at the clock. I'm so engaged in our conversation, but perhaps you can revisit it next week, because I think that would be a useful question to answer. Warren Ingram, Galileo Capital, financial advisor and regular contributor to The Money Show.